Live on LinkedIn in the afternoon. Glad to be here with you. Of course, I'm your host, Tyler Deckerhoff, joined by my amazing producer, Alex Kushner.
What's up? Amazing.
Alex was just lamenting how hot Florida is. I'm sitting here underneath the AC. It's, 70 couple degrees in Spokane. Gorgeous. Just got back from San Diego. Even Alex was like, dude, you're dark. If you're not, you should be watching this on video. That's how it's, the only way we put it out.
It's the best experience on this.
Yeah, it's the best. I mean, you get the full facial expressions. You really get the whole performance.
Yeah.
But he was commenting how dark I was, and I shared with him in the airport this morning as we were traveling home. A lady's like, "Man, you're tan." And
the first thing I said when I saw you on screen here, you got tan.
I get
really tan.
We've talked about this now for months. Alex has only known me in the winter. This is the first summer, and I've told him no, I get dark. And here we go. That is not today's topic.
Yeah.
Follow proper skincare recommendations for you and your skin tones. Do accordingly.
Absolutely.
So today, Alex,
yes,
what are we talking about? What do you got for us?
Today's focus is around this Patagonia news. So those that don't know, Patagonia, the clothing brand, multi-billion-dollar company now, has grown tremendously over the years. For athletes, adventurers, explorers, outdoorsy people, has just requested that I believe it's 90 the staff members. They call them customer service, customer experience people. To either relocate back to these hub locations or leave the company.
That's pretty cut and dry. I mean, it's what you get.
Yeah, pretty cut and dry. After they had been letting them work remote, for a couple of years now since COVID, and not giving a whole lot of detail as to why, other than they want to centralize everyone and bring them closer together, have them come into the office more. Commercial real estate isn't doing too hot, and there's probably spending a whole lot of money on rent.
We got to justify this place.
Yeah, we got to justify why we're spending all this money, and it's just interesting because Tyler, it's kind of anti. I'm trying to think of the right word. The opposite of how this company's philosophy really is, like their purpose of adventure and exploration and going out and doing fun shit. And now they want to bring in the staff, which some of these people I assume have families. They want to relocate.
Yeah.
They're only offering a $4,000 stipend. It costs a hell of a lot more than that to move. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It costs more to move from one, the reality is whether you're moving one house over or you're moving 3,000 miles as you just did, you still got to do all the move. It's a lot of effort and work. Here's what I would say. It's a violation to the culture that Patagonia has been built upon. I did some research. I've known about Patagonia, but I didn't know much about the founder, Yvon, and, finding out that he lived in New England, ended up relocating to Southern California, and part of his climbing experience, he enjoyed being outdoors, became a blacksmith, taught himself to become a blacksmith in order to make climbing gear. And then ultimately, and it leads into clothing, and then it becomes such a social, kind of societal recognized organization.
You have your Patagonia on?
Yeah, in one of the articles, and of course Wikipedia, that's where I found. Wikipedia talked about how it really grew in the essence when a lot of corporate executives wanted to wear the gear for, I would say, either status, street cred, whatever. And so one of the things that they described early on in the culture of Patagonia, in kind of this free living, enjoy nature, that's what you get out of the organization. They used to have, free time off. If you wanted to, they're based in Ventura County, right on the coast of California. And they said, hey, you want to go chase waves? Go chase waves. Make that a part of the business. And so when I see this declaration, come back to the office or else. Now, you and I aren't privy because we weren't given that documentation. We can only read the stories that are recounting what's happened. And so we have to assume and speculate. And of course, never do that. You're bound to be a little bit wrong. But what I think it really lends into is this great desire for leaders to cheat.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, that's it. What I see it. This is leaders are lazy and they want to cheat.
Okay.
I was talking to my sister-in-law about this. My sister-in-law works for an organization that I don't even know the name of it, so I can't even reference it, but they do background checks for reality star, potential reality cast members.
Okay.
And it's based in New York. She lives in California, and she was talking about how, they're an entirely remote organization now. Mm-hmm. And we were discussing this article. We were discussing because we were together over the weekend. And one of the things that I shared with her, and I shared with her this perspective because I recognized that over the last 4 or 5 years of doing this podcast, leadership coaching, whatever, how my background in network marketing, which my sister-in-law as well worked in, forced us to understand the value of connection, recognition, and intentionality in leading. And let me give you an example. Most of the team that my wife and I work with are not in the same town we are. They're anywhere around the world, different continents, and just wherever scattered. And so what that drove, sorry, I just had my calendar pop up. I got to make sure to close that because it's loud in my ear.
We did not hear it.
That's great. And it takes, hey.
Oh, I did hear that.
Did you hear?
Honey
heard it. That's honey. Honey, okay. Off. There was a bald eagle flying around earlier. If you see my stories, there's a bald eagle. Maybe she's seen the bald eagle and she's like, that's bigger than me. Okay, so back to it. So having our network marketing business and growing that through years pre-COVID, we used Zoom. We would go to events, in a lot of the intention of the events, much like the Impact Driven Leader Summit coming up the end of July. Yes, you get great value from the speakers, but you get more value when you're there with someone and you get to interact with someone. And when I say leaders through this entire process have chosen to be lazy, have gotten lazy because they want to cheat. They want people to be back in the office so they don't have to do the work of actually connecting with people. They want people to show up and come to me. I don't need to go to you and call you. If you worked with me, you are on my team, Alex. Alex, you live in Florida. I live here. If we weren't doing this and I would have to take time, we can go out throughout the day. We can use Slack. We can have our customer service. We could have our team meetings. We could use Teams.
Right.
But if I relied on that to connect and build a relationship with you, I'm a horrible leader. Because I don't know what's really going on in your life. And so I see this as another example of leaders in organizations that are ill-equipped and are choosing the easy way out rather than saying, people moved somewhere where they wanted to be.
Right.
They didn't want to be in our city center. And they chose to live in Sandpoint, Idaho, as I know a lot of people have. Kalispell, Montana, 2 popular areas in the country.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to say, hey, you have to move to the closest center, which I think is maybe Portland. I may be wrong where the center is exactly, to work for us. If not, you're not good enough for us.
Yeah.
That's where, again, I say they just have cheated because it can be done. And there are organizations that are doing it very, very well. As my sister-in-law shared, she and her organization is doing well because they've increased performance in 100% remote.
Yeah.
They increased, job satisfaction while being remote because she has done a tremendous job of focusing on what's important to the people, making sure she knows them and knows about them. Has nothing to do with what they do in the job, but who they are as a person.
Yeah, it's interesting because, we're 2024, July, the start of the second half of the year. And now, so clearly they haven't maybe optimized this remote working situation. That's what I would assume. Like, why else move 90 employees? And also the insensitivity of it. I'm just trying to put my mind in their shoes. If I had moved or bought a house, have a family, got kids in school,
totally,
all of these factors, right? That you would think that leadership would think about. And to give them this blanket statement, at least that's what we're reading articles of, either you move and relocate or go find a new job. Holy shit.
You either do this or you're dead to me is what it sounds like. And I think the other factor here that, ties into this. So the nearest to me, which is, Western Montana, North Idaho, is Salt Lake. Okay. Salt Lake for me is a 9-hour drive. It's about an hour and a half flight. One of the things that they declared in this article is you couldn't choose to come to the office a couple days a week. If they have 3 days a week that you're in there, you have to physically live within 60 miles. That was a requirement. It wasn't a, hey, you know what? I know people in different organizations, they have an office requirement. They're in the office 2 days a week.
Right.
And they fly in and fly out. They've chosen to do that because of the savings in cost of living. And as well, what you just mentioned, I don't want to disrupt my kids' lives. I enjoy the quality of life where we live. So I'm going to make the sacrifice of having to travel, whatever that cost is. I'm going to balance that out. I'm going to do it for several years. That makes more sense to me. And yet this organization, which is a very public, visible organization, is saying not good enough.
And listen, I like Patagonia. I have one or two Patagonias that I like wearing.
Yeah.
Comfortable. I will say after a few washes, it did break down a little bit. But I look at the sleeves. I'm like, hey, this is expensive. Why is this thing going out? Anyway, so besides the point. Let's go Tyler. Let's go inside the minds of leadership as they're making this decision. Why and what are they thinking about? We're speculating here, but it's a hot button issue. What is going through their mind? Why would somebody in a leadership position ultimately make this very direct, harsh kind of decision, like in this line in the dirt, one or the other? What would make someone want?
I think it's right off the top. It's easy. It's easier to put the decision on them rather than you. See, it's easier to force people to make themselves either fit in or fit out rather than you make the cuts. It's easier for Patagonia to say, hey, we're going to create this stipulation. You have to be in office as a staff reduction rather than telling themselves, hey, either we've gotten more efficient, we have decreased a lower number of customer service calls. And one of the things the article pointed out is they're overstaffed by 300%. Okay, so instead of admitting that, they go and they force people to exclude themselves rather than being transparent. And again, we're speculating because it's not listed. It could have been listed in the memorandum. That's how people knew they were overstaffed. It's like, hey, we're overstaffed. This is the choice that we decided to make in order to try to centralize our staffing, whatever. Okay, if that's the case, they did that. That's fine. But it doesn't seem like the article read that way. Yeah, again, speculation. So I believe it was leaders choosing to say, I'm not going to put it on my shoulders. I don't want to bear the brunt. And to me, that's exactly the wrong way to go. I was just on my flight back finishing up High Road Leadership, John Maxwell's latest book that came out May 7th. It will be a gift to all of the attendees at the Impact Driven Leaders Summit, July 29th and 30th, Coeur d'Alene,
John will be there.
John will be there to go through High Road Leadership. And one of the things that he talked about is leaders can do so much for their credibility and trust when they're just willing to be honest what is going on, to share the bigger picture in the organization. They actually have found through many different surveys is engagement goes up. And yet we're rife with different organizations that fail to understand that. Patagonia probably could have won this employment cycle mid-year had they said, hey, we're up 300% in staffing. We recognize this because we've gotten more efficient. We're benefiting the customer because we've increased these efficiencies, which help our bottom line, which make us more viable as an organization, profitability through increased prices for both our consumer and our employees. We are at this point centralizing, and that is going to cause a reduction in our staffing. The first measure that we're going to have is we're choosing to engage because it's going to enhance the customer and the internal employee experience. We're asking people, hey, could you move into these centralized areas? And that's the first step we're going to make. Had that been the news blurb, it'd be like, man, that's a pretty good leadership.
Right.
But that is not what came out. That is not what is listed as in the memorandum. You have 72 hours to make this decision or out.
That's and I mean, I'm just trying to think about these families, these people, these 90 families that have to make this really tough decision in a very short amount of time. It took us months, of why my family and my wife and our 2 kids to move to Florida.
What was what's funny, my wife and I were talking about, we have lived in Spokane 15 years this summer.
Wow.
And as you share that, I think back the process for us to move. And so I want to hear from you. When you were, in this situation, you guys recently moved. How long was the cycle of, can we do it? What does this look like? Is this what's right for our family? So forth and so on.
Yeah, it was many months because my wife's brother and his wife, we all lived in Dana Point in Southern California, like 10 minutes from each other, each of us. He had moved the year prior to Florida.
And why did he move?
Cost. He just it's so expensive. He's like, we want to get out. We want to own some stuff out here. And so he went, and they're all very close. And then the mother-in-law was like, my mother-in-law, her mom was like, kind of itching to get back. So she was like, I'm going to go back. And my parents live in New Jersey. I'm lucky I can work from anywhere. I can work remote. So there was really nothing holding me back. We had some very close friends in California and Los Angeles that I do miss, that we wish we could see more often. But that was like, okay. And our kids are still really young, so like it won't really affect them that much. And the cost of living is like literally like 3 times cheaper here in Florida, which is great. And so we made the decision, but it was many months of back and forth dialogue, going back and forth, having these discussions with family members, and then looking for a home, finding the place, selling a home, buying a home, trying to find someone to move all your stuff. Like that's stressful enough, packing everything. It's and then renovations. We wanted to renovate the, like, it was just this whole, and it's set like 10 months in the making, right? And I can't imagine in 3 days having to make this decision, especially if you have older children and who have friends who have established themselves now in these communities, but they've probably lived for maybe a few years now, you would think. To just go and jump ship and there not be this, like you said, this like direct approach from leadership to talk to them about the situation and what's going on and why. And like, I'm thinking of like, is this a ploy to be like, no severance? Like if you decide no, are they going to help these people get jobs? Are they going to give them severance? Or is this like a ploy to like, basically I'm quitting or I'm forced to quit? Like, I have no idea how this is going to unfold.
I mean, there's 2 factors that you brought up there. Your kids are much younger than mine. They don't know. They won't remember being in California for the most part. Your son might, your daughter for sure isn't. Yeah. My kids, when we moved here to Spokane, my youngest was born here. My other 2 were under 3. They kind of remember, not really. But I look at it now as all 3 of them are going to be in high school. My daughter's going to be a senior. And I think about that. If we were in my wife and I were in an employment situation, we had to move to the closest location, Salt Lake, right? Man, that would be hard. It would. Now we're gotten to the point where we're more adventurous. If that's what it took, it maybe not be the end of the world. But man, that's my daughter's boyfriend, my son's girlfriend. You look at all of those things entering high school, they're already into my sons are going to new schools, but they know kids there. And like, it's just a challenge. That one of the things that I come back to from this violation of culture that Patagonia seemed to be so about is that the person was more important than the job they were doing. And now all of a sudden it's like this backhanded, hey, we need to cut staff. So we're going to do it in a way that they self-select rather than us to select.
Yeah. It seems cold-blooded, man. Like I straight up.
There's an element of, and a lot of the call in leadership today is be a good human. And, there's a lot of pieces and parts to this, but you just really say, is the person who ever decided this thinking about, man, what would it be like if I was forced to do this? What would it be like if I was one that had to go home and sit down with my spouse, my partner, whatever family, and say, either I look for a new job when, I have friends that have been, I have a very close friend that's been in customer service, and he's now going on looking for a job for 8 months. And one of the things he's shared with me is so many companies, I have friends in banking looking for jobs. So many companies have said, we are not going to hire till post-election, probably first of the year, because we're just riding it out.
I've heard the same thing. Many friends, 15-year careers, late 30s, early 40s now, pretty well established, that got laid off over the last few months. We spoke about this maybe a month or so ago, and it's really difficult to find a nice, solid, good paying job out there, especially in some of these larger cities. And so that's a risk if you decide, hey, I'm not going to go because I have this community here, my friends, my family. Now am I going to wait it out another 7, 8, 9 months? Are they going to cover me for those months based on this company's decision? And then I just think about the leadership because, that's our primary focus here. And, we talk about this all the time, but is it selfishness? Because these leaders, right, they're making the most money. You think they're hopefully putting in the most hours, the most sacrifice. And then you hear a story like this and it seems like the total opposite of, and why people have such distrust for leadership in a news story like this.
Well, I think because they're just, it lacks of humanness. And humanness meaning I'm going to think about the other person. And we can go back to, days of old where this wouldn't even, it was thought about, but we didn't have the case because we didn't have this remote workforce that we were disgruntled. They were remote. So we're calling them back into the office. And I think, as we look into leadership, what's I mentioned to you, two of the barriers that I speak of, inactivity and insensitivity. This reeks of it. The inactivity meaning I'm going to go through the active process of dealing with the hard and having the hard conversations. Meaning I'm going to be open and transparent and give people volunteers and say, hey, volunteers that want to, either move or leave, great, we'll handle that accordingly. And then go into the next round of, options. The insensitivity, as I just mentioned, the person likely it's not the team leader that's making this decision. It's someone in HR that's spinning it for them. It's someone that is maybe removed or they're given a job to do and they know it's wrong, but yet that's what it's coming down from the board. That's what's coming down from another senior leader to say, hey, just be cold-blooded and hard and don't care about it. And often that, as I've learned, a lot of people in HR are not that way, don't want to be that way because they understand the ramifications, but their hands are tied because they're like, well, that's just the directive we have to go with.
Right.
There's people that are part of the Impact-Driven Leader Roundtable that have shared just as much. And, the interesting part as we get into that, and, say you are someone listening and you've been in this situation where you've had to make some of these statements and, this is wrong. And I think the opportunity there is to help that leader that maybe is not recognizing the human impact to say, hey, have you considered what this is going to do to a family? Now, they could very much say, yeah, I don't care. And we have that in certain leadership positions. But I think that's also the great opportunity at each one of these. Where can you make an impact? You can make an impact in every level of the organization when something comes to you and you have the opportunity to stand up and say, have we thought this all the way through?
What would you, I wanted you to kind of give some advice to two people. The first, if you were an employee of that business, say you were in maybe senior level management and you saw this unfolding in the news and the press coming out, what would you do? What would be the right thing to do? Not someone that's having to be relocated, but just someone who's witnessing this unfold.
Yeah, that's a great viewpoint. I think I go into massive damage control because this is what I've recognized before. I've seen this happen in an organization we're intimately involved with. CEO comes in. It was, maybe roughly the current circumstances where it's like, we got to get our budget tighter because we don't know what's going to happen the next 6 to 9 months with interest rates and, the fallout of the election. So we're going to proactively lay people off. And this is what happened. Is it made everyone else in the organization fearful for their job. And so if I was a senior leader of, say, a different division, maybe I was in the acquisitions, meaning, like raw ingredient acquisition. Maybe I was leading that team. Okay, so we have customer service team, ingredient, product acquisition. And I'm looking at this and what's just unfolded. And I'm looking at my group and maybe in that, because it's a lot of just, you don't have to be sitting in an office to, be a broker for raw ingredients. And maybe I have a fairly remote team and it works really well. And they're sitting there thinking, oh crap, is this me next? I would go forward and I wouldn't send out a message to everyone. I would reach out to every person and say, hey, you're valuable to me. If anything, I will fight for you in making sure that if we do come to a place where I am privy and aware that we need to adjust our budget, our, what's allocated towards human, resource, I'm going to be very transparent and upfront with you. I'm not going to backdoor you. I'm not going to blindside you.
Yeah.
And that's what I would do, because I think it's the only way to go forward and say to each person on the team to say, hey, it's 90 people, I think was on this customer service team. Yes, I would go make 90 phone calls. And by the time I got to the third one, everyone already knows because they all talking on Slack, whatever else. But I would make the effort to make every single phone call because every single person is valued.
Yeah.
In knowing that, hey, you are valuable to me. I am going to make sure that I am going to be as forward with as much information as I can about what's going on. And if I have any insight to understand, it's not to disparage other leadership, but it's to take that ownership to say, hey, I care about you. I care about you and you're valuable to my team.
No, you said something that I didn't really think about till you said it, which is this culture of fear, or at least for a moment, that the rest of the organization must be living in this mindset, which is a horrible place to be after, hearing this news about your colleagues, to be like, oh shit, who's next?
Yeah.
What's going to happen next? And it would almost do the opposite of what, they're probably trying to do, which is save money, cut costs, because, budgets are getting tighter. But it would cause stagnation, I would think. If you have employees
100%.
who are fearful, you want output and throughput, but you're probably getting a lot of the opposite over the next course of the couple months because people are fearful.
Absolutely.
Of the company.
And you're going to have people that start looking for jobs.
Right.
You're going to have that where people start looking for different. Just imagine this. All right. July 1st, right? Canada Day. You're in Canada, you're out hanging out with people and you are, celebrating the holiday. Later this week, we're going to be celebrating Independence Day here in the US. And just imagine you work for Patagonia. You go to an event, you guys are on the beach and you have a party with some, local friends, and they're like, Alex, man, I just heard about Patagonia. What's going on? That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Like, what are you talking about? Like, go Google Patagonia right now. You'll find about 100 articles.
Yep. And everyone's going to ask you, hey, what's the inside scoop? What's going on? What's happening? And you're going to be like, say you work in my department, the raw ingredient acquisition. You're like, I don't know. Or, say you work in a different department where a leader didn't talk to you, but say you work in the organization that I work in. You're like, hey, yeah, I understand what's going on. And, this is what's happening. But I also work for a guy that cares more about me than necessarily just following the company line. You know what? I have confidence in him. I have belief. I have trust that whatever happens, he's going to let me know so it doesn't happen in a spur of a moment. What does that tell as you're expressing that? Just thinking about that. If you're expressing that to someone, what does that do for your belief and their belief in the company?
Oh, I mean, if they were told that through the grapevine after being out on vacation and then getting the news that this was all happening and unfolding, the confidence in the company would be zero.
Yeah.
I'd be like first trying to email and text anyone right away of like what's going on, what's happening, and kind of go into a panic mode because you're just so uncertain. There's uncertainty around it. And then that would just lead to a lot of uncertainty within the entire organization, which would lead to a stall out of productivity, which would ultimately cause a lot of issues in terms of business revenue and growth.
Yeah.
And I would imagine a company that's grown this large has a board of advisors, consultants. What if you were consulting them? They've got to be running damage control. I'm sure that's kind of what's happening right now.
Well, I think what's probably, and again, I haven't searched it much in the last 2 days. I know you've done a lot more as far as
no real
the commentary, and so to me, this is probably a lot of boards are sitting around looking at, oh snap, we better do better than that because, we maybe have this coming into the third quarter. We started the third fiscal quarter right now. For some companies, they're first, but by a calendar year. And, looking at how we're addressing things, they may be like, uh-oh, yeah, that didn't go so well for them. We've had a few of these, Microsoft, there's been some global layoffs. This isn't new. And I think the idea of you can just steamroll and railroad people because you're the board, you're the leader, you don't have to answer them. We have generations that are telling you no. We talked about that last week a little bit, Gen Z and what Gen Z demands. I wrote about a newsletter that the Gen Z is demanding better compensation, better communication, and better respect. And from what we've gathered, Patagonia has failed on all three. They're not giving better compensation because if they were, they would say, hey, we'll equate this based upon your living. If you're living in North Idaho and the cost of living is X and you got to move, we're asking you to move to Salt Lake City, we'll do a salary adjustment. They didn't do that. I mean, that's something that would help someone facilitate that move. Respect. Hey, you have 3 days to do it. It's not very respectful. And then communication as far as, really explaining more to the story. I'm guessing this is a part of it. I don't know. I could hop on Patagonia right now and go ask a question. And I just wonder if I do it. And this is my wonder. This is the customer service department, right? We're talking about the customer service. Customer service is, probably one of the areas that is getting more replaced with AI than a lot of others. Yeah. Because if I come on here and I just go and I ask for help, if I ask to contact it right down here in the corner, it's got a little purple circle with 3 dots and a couple bubbles. And when I click on that, it asks me my name and chat now. And that used to be manned by a woman, whatever, by a person.
Yeah.
And now I can guarantee I'll probably go through 50 to 100 different questions before I ever talk to a person. That is a direct result of AI, and that is what's causing this reduction in customer service staff. But no one wants to admit it.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, there's technological advancements that have just gotten better and better, and they're only going to get better. And there is a lot of jobs out there that can and will be replaced. I think it's more how it was handled. Just like you were saying, it's just that direct and honest approach of like, listen, like this is the situation, and like we're gonna be and doing it a while ago and being super direct instead of like almost like this excuse of like, hey, relocate and I was reading actually another article. Most of them, at least 1/3 of them, chose not to relocate and stay where they were.
And maybe that is the number that they needed to clear.
Yeah.
And, it's and they have to move by September 30th. I'm just picking up here. I'm kind of seeing, what has happened, looking into Reddit.
Getting the meat and potatoes.
Getting the
articles, Twitter X comments.
Okay, here's something. This is a real reason behind all these absurd. You have 3 to 7 days to decide if you can suddenly move to a different city. Requests from companies, and it's happening to more than Patagonia. There's a lot of hiring, especially for remote positions and customer service during COVID. Companies need to do their usual layoffs, but don't have the press that comes with mass layoffs. So they make demands that no, many people can't meet to return to a small number of offices, and they go, see, no layoffs. AT&T and Dell just did this as well.
So is this a loophole to not look like, I guess we're talking about, when you see these reports, right? If you're watching CNBC and you see these like job reports, is there a way so they don't report job cuts or job loss? Or like, is this loophole of some kind of reporting the data?
I guess that could be. I think it comes back to it's just someone that is, again, organizations, whether those boards, whoever is making the decisions, saying we're going to try to skirt this rather than be above board. And what I hear, what I see, what I know is our society is no longer going to accept that. We have higher demands for the respect for, being a part of the organization. You want me to come and to be devoted? Well, then I need something from you. I need to know, what are we doing as an organization? Where do I fit? And are you going to look out for me at some point? Right. And if you can't address those three, then I'm going to go look somewhere else, because there are companies that are willing to do that. And ironically, Patagonia has been one of those companies in the past. I don't know what their Glassdoor rating is. I don't know what they are. But this whole idea that we are shareholders to Mother Earth, that's right, the whole idea. It's like, no, it's about something bigger. Well, in one of the articles I read, it's like, you kind of are missing the boat a little bit here,
right?
Where you're almost too much Earth and forgetting about humans. And who are your customers? Who are your employees? Who really are here for you? It's kind of funny.
Yeah, it is funny because, you think about, like we spoke about earlier in the conversation, if it was a company that maybe had this kind of trouble in the past, where you're like, this banking company is known for being, pretty shitty to their employees, not phased. But when you have a company where, it's very mission driven and purpose driven, like, go explore, go do fun stuff, go travel, and then it's like this anti, thesis of who they are, right? And it's like that's where it's, because then you go, oh, if they're willing to do this, like how like what is it really like at this place? Like, is it all about this? And I know they've donated a ton of money, and $71 million donation in 2023 to some good causes, but those
The thing there, and maybe to wrap up on, is incongruency undermines. Incongruency in leadership, incongruency in organizations, incongruency to mission, vision, and values undermines always. And it's this degradation of trust, and it is this elimination of credibility. And so that incongruency, and a lot of times we can't absolutely put our finger on it, but we can certainly feel it. It's instinctive. Yeah. Man, I don't know why I don't trust them, but I just don't trust them. There's a sense of incongruency where it's just like, something's off. I don't get it. Something's off. And I think that's where, for this organization and so many others in this space, we're venturing into it. It's like, ooh, if that could happen over there and my leader's not speaking against it, could it happen here? And what I feel like this gets us into is just a general uneasiness in organizations. And the biggest thing I can speak to, if you're someone leading an organization or if you're someone working in an organization, demand your leader to lead you. And part of demanding them to lead you, not in kind of like, like a pressure situation. I want to say gun to your head, but there's got to be a better way to say it. But it's kind of like, lead me, right? But it's like, hey, yeah, it's like, dude, tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
Like level with me. And I think that's where we're demanding so much more in our society. And at the same point, if people are doing that for you, you can't tell them to shut up and go away. You need to sit down and have town hall meetings. You need to, have that conversation with them, because all they're looking for is assurance. That's what people are looking for all over our society. Why is the political system a mess? Because all we want is assurance, and it's not there from any player.
Let me, final question. I want to ask you this, and I love that we stream on LinkedIn, because that is where a lot of people go, professionals to educate themselves, find alpha, even look for a lot of jobs. But if you are one of those people living with this fear or uncertainty and doubt, what advice would you give to those that are either looking for a job and in that kind of like uncertainty, they don't know what's happening, or they see what's happening across the market, they know AI is coming, all these things are coming that are maybe fearful right now? What kind of advice can you give those people?
Start with yourself. Level up yourself. Be willing to invest in yourself. Make yourself stronger. One of the things that we teach within the impact-driven leader framework is recognizing your fears and insecurities. And I think that's what I would suggest to someone is, hey, instead of being unsure, be sure. Because so often I think when we come into this situation of, I'm afraid to leave, I'm afraid to quit, I'm afraid to make a change. And a lot of those fears and insecurities, because I don't think I could work somewhere else. I don't think I could pivot to a different career. And I'm not saying, that maybe that's coming for you, but be more solid in yourself. Be more solid in what it makes you unique. What problem do you solve? How do you show up to others? How can you change your mindset and your toxic beliefs that are they're in there for all of us? And I think once you create that foundation for yourself, then you can go into the next step of choosing to grow. And maybe that's grow within, grow to a different place, grow with others. And I think, again, that's part of the framework. But man, if I look back and what I was going through 15 years ago now, when 08, 09 and this kind of turmoil in society economically and brought on from different things, the best thing that I could do at that point was work on myself. And I waited too long. I waited too long. And now the adage goes, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And that was a part. But man, my encouragement to you is invest in yourself right now if you're in that spot, because it will pay massive, massive dividends.
That's great. I love that.
Awesome.
Reinvest in yourself.
Thanks, Alex, for bringing that to our attention, having us discuss it today. As always, if you're listening, thank you for being here. I encourage you to subscribe on YouTube so you can get all the back episodes. You can get notified when our podcast releases. There's a lot of great content that we share there, interact with people. And then a reminder, said it a couple times, I want to say it again, July 29th and 30th, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. John Maxwell himself, the leadership expert, world's leadership expert, is one of the speakers. He's going to be there with us in person. I encourage you to go check out the event. Go to tylerdeckerhoff.com. There'll be a splash that comes up for the event, or you can go work with Tyler and pick an annual summit as well. We'll make sure we put it in the show notes. Till next time, thanks for being here. Choose to lead with impact.